Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next post-season interview for Survivor Millennium Park. What else can be said about this next contestant that hasn't already been said by her tribe mates and the fans of the show? She's been called a boss, a badass, the queen of Millennium Park. This next player started out on the Blue Hara tribe, and after a slow start to the day, her tribe started to pick up momentum and found themselves in the majority at the end of day one. Now, during the course of that, she found herself in the seat of power in the tribe with key alliances with every other member of the team that all ran through her. On day two, other players started to take notice of her power and tried to make an attempt to vote her out, but she was able to swing things back at the last minute and saved herself and ultimately made it all the way to the final four, as far as she could go with her alliance, where she ultimately lost a tiebreaker challenge at the final four, leaving the game as a major threat to win. I am so excited to sit down to talk to the one, the only, Kim. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Honestly, Kim, when I found out that you were willing to do one of these interviews, I bumped other people out of line. So Justin, I know you're watching. You're coming soon, bud. Don't worry. Your time will come.
Oh, sorry to everyone else, but I am very excited to be here. So
Kim, how have things been since last August? It's been a while.
I know. It's been great. So I am relatively new to the area. I started a new teaching job here this year and it's going really well. And yeah, I mean, it's been kind of non-eventful, but pretty good overall. How are you?
Can't complain. Can't complain. Things are good. Nothing feels as eventful after, you put together a reality TV show.
I'm sure.
So Kim, I've got a ton of questions here and we had a lot of fans write in. So if it's okay with you, I just want to jump right into it. Could you tell us a little bit about what was your experience with Survivor before participating in this? Were you a fan of the show before this?
Sure. So I was a fan of the show prior to doing the weekend. Definitely not one of the super fans. Growing up, I had seen like a season here or there. But once COVID happened and quarantine started, one of my best friends, Andrew, who, if you're watching, I'm sure at this point you're very familiar with, got really into Survivor. So that was his like quarantine thing, was he was watching through season after season. And I got interested like in just paying attention to what he was doing. And so he recommended a few seasons to me. And then I spent like all of June 2020 just on my couch binging many Survivor seasons, just one after the other, like 12 hours a day. It was really glamorous and fun. But hopefully everyone can relate. And so that really got me invested in it. So coming in, I like had a favorite season, a favorite player. Still definitely not like, I know Justin knows way more about it than I do. But it's something that
Justin knows more than anybody should.
That's true. Justin is intimately familiar with all of the ins and outs of Survivor. So, and hopefully one day I'll reach that level, but I would call myself a fan and but not maybe one of the biggest and most familiar ones on the show.
Sure. Do you remember what your favorite season is?
Yeah, I love heroes versus villains because I love a villain in general. I think that's such a fun thing. And to see that happen. And there's the one moment on there when I think it's Sugar that gets her top like ripped off.
That's right.
But she gives like the middle fingers up after. It's my favorite moment in all of Survivor. I'm like, what an amazing like boss moment for her and like reclaiming that. I loved it. So that's my favorite season, mostly because of that specific moment.
Kim, do you feel like you were a hero or a villain on Millennium Park?
Oh, that's such a good question. I was very concerned I was going to be a villain. And I think I said that to you at some point too.
You did, yeah.
And I was like, oh, because I played a very social game, which I think by nature becomes a bit of a manipulative, deceptive kind of way to play. Because I was not at all, like I was not a strong challenge player. I kind of was just relying on those connections that I could make, which I think by nature felt villainous from the outside in terms of the amount of times that I had to look somebody in the eye and tell them something that I flat out knew was a lie, which is not comfortable, but that was all I really had to come in and play with. So I guess I would lean more towards villainous in that way, but I had my own moral code with all of that, which was that I had my alliance, I was sticking with my alliance. And I went deceptive from like the outside in, I didn't touch Tom until I had no other option. And I never touched Justin. Like I never wanted to go after people that like I had been true to from the beginning. And that was my like way of morally justifying all of the lies and the very strategic social play that I felt like I needed to do to survive.
No, that's very interesting because everybody in this game sort of comes in with like, what are their morals? Like, what are the things they're willing to do? You went in like, there's like a level of people I'm not going to betray, and it sounds like some of the people that were maybe in that inner circle did not reciprocate. But I think we're going to get into all of that. So how did you were one of the people that comes in with a strong pre-existing relationship, being Andrew, your best friends, he's staying at your house for the weekend. What were your feelings about that, like going into it knowing you were going to be competing against him?
I mean, we are best friends because of playing games together. Like this is our like friendship group tattoo here. Like all of us, there's 4 of us and we all have different card suits. I'm the spade. And so like I am very comfortable and familiar playing against Andrew in a competitive gaming atmosphere. And I think a hallmark of our group is the fact that we really play hard and play to win. And so I was excited because this was a familiar dynamic between me and Andrew. And I really went in, we both very much assumed that we would be put on separate tribes to begin with. And as soon as that happened, I took the approach, and I think that he did as well, of we're here to play this game. We're not here to like be best friends right now. So like if we can play together, awesome. If we're playing against each other, we're playing against each other. We're playing here to win. And I know I respect that level of gameplay. I know he does too. So it was exciting to continue that dynamic that we already have, and especially to play it on this like completely different arena with all these other people and this, much larger scale thing than we had ever done before.
Right. No, that was definitely the vibe I got during casting, was that you two are like good, like you're good people to have like at a game night. Like, you're going to like play in the spirit of the game. So yeah. I was excited to get to see like what was going to happen once you two finally met up, which again, we'll get into. I'm skipping all over the place. I'm just so excited to talk about all this. So we get to the park, it's 90 degrees, it's 9 a.m. You start to see who else is on your team, and you get down to your camp. Do any strong impressions start to form about anybody on your team?
Absolutely. Justin, right away, I knew I was going to bond with. I could tell just upon meeting him, it was just like a energy read type thing of like, oh, wow, this is someone that I'm really going to have a connection with. Jontan as well. A very strong impression. A very strong first impression from Jontan that, he continued to make many impressions as the weekend went on. Very much the like the character of the tribe, and so that was automatically like, wow, okay, very quickly you're like, oh, okay, this is someone that we are going to play with, and this is a strong personality. And so that was great. Everyone else, I got the vibe of like, oh, this is awesome, everyone's really friendly, but it took longer to sort of figure out how I was going to fit into all of the different people. But Justin and Jontan for sure immediately stood out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jontan's a character. He definitely stands out quickly. So we get to the first challenge, and Kim, I got to tell you, when I was putting this together, I was like, all right, we're gonna do a math challenge. We've got Tony, the math student, on one team, and we've got Kim, the math teacher, on the other. Surely those two are gonna duke it out. Why didn't you do the math puzzle?
I know it's awful that I'm like on there with my little like descriptor of like math teacher, and I did. All right, I like, gosh, this is me blowing up my career a little bit here. Hopefully not, but I do not actually come from a math background, and my worst subject growing up was math.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and so I got into teaching through the New York City Teaching Fellows a long time ago, which is like a program to sort of like expedite your master's and just sort of getting a field in New York City public schools. And the field that they had openings in was special education. And in New York, with the SPED license, you can teach every subject. And so I told my first principal, like, oh, I'm comfortable really doing anything but math. And I think he heard math and threw me into math. And over the course of the 5 years I spent there, I had some really incredible co-teachers and actually grew to love teaching math. That being said, I absolutely love it. I have so much respect for it now. I'm not the person at the table that's going to calculate the tip. I'm not the person that is going to volunteer, because especially how bad would it be if I had taken it and lost? That looks worse. You know what? I would rather sit back in that moment. I'm kind of cosplaying as a math teacher through my career and making that work. And so, hopefully, I think, I do my job okay. I don't know that mental math is my strong suit. And that is a long story of that.
Do you think that you could take the math puzzle from that challenge and apply it in the classroom? Like that could be like an extra points assignment for the kids?
Absolutely. I do like riddles and fun things at the end of lessons. That would be a perfect one. And I will say, looking back, I still don't know that I would have done any better than anyone else. But that, to me, like that was more of a logic thing. I was very concerned this was going to be some real heavy, like mental math. And that is not my strong suit. And so I was willing to I know I saw Zach immediately kind of said something, and I actually just watched the series again, like this past weekend, just to sort of like refresh. And I'm watching myself in that moment be like, well, I already said I'm a math teacher. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. You take it. Like, sure. Zach,
wait a second. They knew you were a math teacher. Karen got so much flack that she just works at a bank. She didn't do the math. Did anyone say anything to you?
Not at the time. I think later on they were like, you didn't even step up for that. And I was like, oh, well, like Zach did. It's fine.
That's so
well, but yeah. So there you go. Oh, well.
Oh my God. So you make it through the first tribal council. You guys get back, and Tom disappears. You guys all sort of pull to the side, and Tom like drifts his own way. What did you think about that? Like, were you aware of what was going on with him? Like, what'd you think with that?
I definitely thought he was looking for an idol. I mean, it was a relatively small space that we were in. And so my concern there was that that's what he was doing. Originally, I was a little concerned he was going to be off like talking to somebody else, which was fine. Those conversations were starting to happen at that point on our tribe, at least. But it was just a noticeable, like, he's been missing for a while and the rest of us are all here. So I was concerned about the idol, which definitely raised that red flag. And then I think pretty quickly after that, it became public knowledge amongst, most of our tribe that he had found the idol, and that was, a factor moving forward.
Right. So Tom finds the idol. And now at this point, I think this is about when the Horror Alliance starts to form. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think the original trio was started by Justin, of you, Justin, and Karen.
Yeah, that's right.
So from your perspective, like, how did that end up shaking out that instead of Karen, we have you, Justin, Tom, and Zach? Like, how did that become the four?
I think that Justin had the opportunity to speak to Karen one-on-one before I did. And I think it was sort of that like original walk down into camp. He had spoken to her. So he turned to the two of us at the same time and said, hey, I would really like to ally with you guys, I think, going into the first challenge. And I was just thrilled to have anyone that was, interested. I'm like, absolutely. Not to say anything, I got a very great read from Karen in that first like group meeting that we had, sort of talking about our strengths and weaknesses. But I think Justin was sort of the first person to bring us together as a trio, and that sounded great to me. We went through those first two challenges, had 2 losses in a row. It was a really tricky situation in terms of like, I felt very strongly that if we lost another one, that was going to be it. Our morale would be so low, we would be so shaken that we would keep losing, and it was just going to be like sort of the end of our tribe one by one. So out of that second challenge, my biggest concern was we have to win another challenge. And Karen was an incredible tribe member, but I did feel like in that second challenge, in the first challenge a little bit, that she just wasn't as strong of a challenge player. And so at that point, I just was like, I feel like we should, eliminate maybe who I think is the weakest challenge link, as difficult as that was. I know Justin was really bummed to like have to make that move. And I think we all were, but it kind of just felt like at this point, like we have to focus on winning a challenge. And it felt like that was sort of the only move. And then out of that, it was just the 5 of us left. Like that was it. And then we had that awesome turn of luck where we started winning, and like that sort of cemented this like group of 5, I think, that we had there.
Do you feel like, and this is a little bit like my theory about how the game went, so I'm almost looking for like confirmation on this. The impression I'm under is that it was you who really like made the connection with like Justin's here, Tom and Zach are here. You're the one that kind of linked that. Do you feel similarly? Was that your impression as well?
Yeah, I think that I had connected with Zach already. I think Tom actually, I took longer for me to have that sort of like one-on-one moment. But I had an early connection with Zach. I had an early connection with Justin. And then I think I was more of the driving force in voting Karen out at that point, which then Justin, who had been focused on that 3, I think now was like a little bit maybe more open. Although I will say, like, we were really all at that point, like on the same level. It was more just like, who have you had the opportunity to speak to more, develop more of a connection with? And I had a good read about Zach after like even that first like meeting. I just, and Tom as well. But again, I didn't really speak to Tom one-on-one for a while.
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe I was a link there, but I also will say, like, I think it probably would have happened regardless. There was such a morale crisis into a like huge celebration that I think that is going to bond you regardless of anybody, you know, whoever's doing what in that situation.
Of course. And you guys don't end up going back to tribal council for the whole rest of the first day. So you're spending a lot of downtime at camp. Did you get a feel for like there was any sort of hierarchy forming? Like, did you feel like there was maybe like a lower ranking member of the team, or also maybe even like somebody who you felt was like the person to look to as a leader? Did you feel any sort of dynamics like that forming?
Yeah, definitely. I think Justin stood out as a leader from the start. I think he was very familiar with the game. I think he had, as I now know, had prior experience playing a live game. And just was very comfortable in all of the different dynamics that this entails, the one-on-ones, the group, the doing the challenges. So he stood out as a leader right away. You know, John is a character. I don't think he was an odd one out at all. I think John was actually a very vital member of that group of 5. But character-wise, he was really making some choices. He beat up a tree. To which I still go back to. My favorite part of him beating up the tree is the fact that he put the shin guards on as if there was a threat to his shin from his opponent, the tree. Love that. Love going back and watching that.
That's a great detail. I never thought about that.
Oh yeah, I know. He fully put the defensive protection on. So he was like, but it was kind of like a really fun way of lightening the mood, because it's a weird, awkward thing to be in this group dynamic and also knowing eventually you're going to have to pick each other off. And so he provided, I think, much needed levity. And Zach and Tom were both like part of the group. I think Zach also took a leader role. He facilitated a lot of conversations and things like that, but it seemed to me like maybe Justin was the stronger one. And I think I was maybe one of the more like intense people. I think I'm intense in general. And I think particularly in gameplay, I'm very intense. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we go through the show. But I think one of my biggest weaknesses in this was the fact that I was standing so far in front of a lot of things, conversations with actions, and really being the mouthpiece. And looking back, I think that might have been one of my downfalls in terms of putting a little too much attention, drawing too much attention to myself and like a threat that I might pose.
Do you feel like at this point, so like we're getting closer to the end of the first day, I don't mean to yada yada the pre-merge, but we just have so much to talk about post-merge. Would you say at the end of day 1 that Justin was the person you were closest to, or was there anybody else? Because I know that there was a lot of discussion like in day 2 of like, oh, Justin, Kim actually wants you out 4th. Like, so, you know, it's, and obviously the end result is you two stick together to the end, but like sort of in the moment, end of day 1, is Justin the person you feel closest to by the end of it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely had the strongest connection with Justin. I think that we had really established like a duo kind of mentality. And even though I really felt strongly about the rest of my tribe as well, he was the only one that I really felt like I had that like intense bond, like, okay, this is my ride or die. This is who I want to go to the final 2 with. And this is the person that I really trust in this whole situation.
Got it. And at this point, contact with the other tribe is extremely limited. Were you forming impressions about any of them just based on like the limited meetings? You've got like a little bit of interaction challenges. Obviously, the fire puzzle, there's a fair amount of interaction including, I think, a great character moment. One of my favorite moments from you, where I ask everybody how they're feeling, and we hear like hot, tired, sweaty, tired, and you just say good. like that's Kim right there. She's fine. Like everybody else is falling apart, and Kim's doing great.
Happy to be there. That was the best day ever. It was so much fun. God, it would have been way worse weather. I still would have been good. But I guess from the other tribe, we were really, I think, all looking at Emma and Jean. They seemed like they were leading their tribe. They seemed like a strong duo. They seemed like they were sort of the mouthpieces of what was happening, like sort of leading the charge of what was happening on the other tribe. And I think Tony was always this like looming threat. He was taller, like he gave the appearance of being more athletic, and that became very apparent in the second day, but in the first day, based on like what the challenges were, it was more of this like guess. And so it was always this thing, even though I think in that first day, I think Tony played an incredible game. And I think that he really held off on fully showing his cards in terms of the threat that he was until later on, which I think was so smart. But there was that, like, this is someone we have to look out for, even though he might not be showing this in these first few challenges as much. Not that he was doing poorly, just that like he wasn't necessarily like jumping ahead of everybody else. We all still were like, that is someone to keep an eye on. And looking back, there were several opportunities where we talked about focusing on Tony and didn't. And had we played a better game, I think that, who knows how it all could have ended differently.
I mean, that's like what you love in Survivor, like the mist, like we should have gotten him when we could. Totally. So I'd be curious to hear what you thought about where Andrew stood, because he sort of famously, nail on the head, said, I bet Kim is actually super like well connected in the tribe, and she probably has like a guy number one who she's like this with. When I found that confession, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So any expectations for how Andrew might have been faring?
Oh, I knew Andrew was going to play an incredible social game. I knew that was going to be his strength as well. And Andrew is also just in life the type of person that, like, if you're at a party with a bunch of people that don't know each other, Andrew is the guy that like is talking to everybody super comfortable. He's just really, really good at making connections with people and making people feel comfortable and heard. So I knew he was going to work that tribe like incredibly. And I think especially in those early episodes when we get a lot of tribe footage, he's my favorite to watch from his tribe, because he's constantly coming up with these like quips, and like I'm just laughing. Maybe I'm biased, but like he made me laugh so hard. I'm like, he's so
Andrew had a lot of good lines. He was very funny.
He really was. I'm like, oh my God, he's such an improv artist too. So like that makes sense. So I knew he was going to play a strong social game, but I also was not expecting him to be the loudest one or the mouthpiece or the person. Like I expected him to play a more nuanced game, because I think he tends to just be a more nuanced and have more subtlety than maybe like what that like stereotypical player would be. So his game day one was kind of exactly what I expected it to be. And from what I was seeing, what I did read wrong was that I was not seeing him in the few moments we had tribe on tribe. I thought that he was like kind of bonding with Wu and maybe not having a connection with other people, just based on like the conversations that I had. And so that to me was the surprise going into day two, was like, oh, he's very enmeshed in this group, no less so than I am, which was difficult because I had really been hoping to kind of poach him. And I quickly realized, oh, I don't think he's available to be poached. I think he's pretty, strong with his alliance, which, then it became, all right, it's a dog eat dog world.
Game on. Kim, anything else from day one that you wanted to talk about before we jump into the wild merge?
I don't think so. It was really I do remember, I know Andrew talked about this in his interview too, that like we went into this with no expectations and very afraid that this was going to be something that was like not fun at all.
Right. Total
Ready,
gamble. You don't know me, like,
not at all. Yeah, we really didn't know you at all. And it was like, okay, we don't know what this is going to be. And so going into it, how quickly I went from like, oh, I hope this is fun to like, I am putting my heart and soul on the line and I am so emotionally committed to this. It was like a 15-minute window. It was incredible. And I remember going home to my partner that night and being like, Andrew was staying with me that weekend and he went in the shower, and up until then, because we were very true, we didn't talk about, we didn't care anything, like we really put the game aside. And I waited for him to get in the shower and I like listened and I was like, I'm doing such a great job. I made such a great team. It's going to be so much fun. I don't know. Like I was so excited and he was like, oh wow. Okay. Like, that's great. And I just was like word vomiting, like waiting for him to like finish his shower, like whisper screaming, like so excited. So I was joyous after the first night. I was so excited for day 2, which was, I think, a fun dynamic to come back into and start the very eventful second day.
That's awesome. It's nice to hear when anybody had energy at the end of day 1, because a lot of us were dying at that point.
It was a lot. Well, you guys especially, my God, that was brutal weather and you guys having to run. You did a lot more running back and forth than we did. So
it was rough. It was rough, but we do get to day 2, 10 degrees cooler, like, or maybe just 5. We get to the merge. You guys have your immunity challenge. You guys get back to camp. I believe, if I'm remembering right, that you came up with the merge tribe name, Aesop, which was an excellent choice. Like when I heard that, I was like, like whoever came up with that, like that's making the episode. Excellent choice for a merge tribe name.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So you guys are up 5-4. And, in theory, like this could have been a steamroll. Like I had production team members that were like, Dylan, you got to do something, like this is going to be a train wreck, like Tortuga's done. I'm like, well, hold on, let's see how this plays out. But you guys have the majority. At any point, did you consider trying to like bring Andrew into the fold? I know we see Tony in the episodes and in a deleted scene we just posted. He really integrated into the group. Did you think Andrew had a chance to get in with you guys too?
Absolutely. I mean, that first day, I was repeatedly saying at the end of the day, everybody look to Andrew. I think we're going to be able to pull Andrew. Again, I was not seeing that he had a super strong connection to the rest of the people on his tribe. And Wu had just gone home. And I was really thinking like, oh, that might have been his strongest alliance. So I went into day 2 very much feeling that way. And I think I knew he would have given more of a signal if he was more open to like switching right over, just knowing him as well as I know him and having those conversations. He was guarded. And I immediately realized, oh, he has something going on here. And then very quickly, I was like, okay, I mean, if he's not an option, if he's more enmeshed in this, then we already have the majority. We didn't need Andrew at that point. It wasn't a priority to pull somebody from the other tribe. It just kind of would have been nice. And so once I was less confident about Andrew, I was more of the mentality of let's take this to the final 5 and then we can, figure it out from there.
Was it difficult to have your friend like on the opposing side? Like I think of the conversation with Andrew, Gene, Emma, you and Justin. Eventually Justin leaves. I think I remember like you kind of came back and gave them a little bit of inside scoop. I don't remember exactly what you said at that point, but like, and then later there's a one-on-one conversation between you and Andrew that didn't ultimately make the episode, where I believe you tell him straight up, like, look, like the 5 of us aren't budging. Like this is kind of what it is. Was that like a difficult part of the game for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, especially as the game went on, it's not comfortable to look someone that I like love more than life to like in the eyes and lie to his face. Like that's not a comfortable feeling. As much as we are both people that respect the gameplay, it's difficult. And realizing that early on in day 2 that, oh, I don't think we're going to wind up working for the same plan here. Definitely it was, but again, we do both have such respect for that level of gameplay, and it's such a hallmark of our friend group that we come from, that it was kind of honestly like, that sucks, but like we're here to play the game and we're gonna play the game. And then I think almost in my mind, I almost turned the switch off of Andrew, my best friend, to Andrew, on the other tribe who is not working for what I'm working for right now. And we will circle back around to who we are outside of this once this day ends.
Of
And
course.
I think that helped a lot. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't ideal, but it was what it was.
Got it. Got it. So Kim, I'd love to hear from your perspective, like how this vote shifted over time. Because if I remember right, at the end of day one, we're going to say it's Tony, but it's actually Emma. You guys get back to camp at the start of day two, and it's okay, like it's definitely Emma, like Tony's not even a concern. And then by the end of it, Jean ends up with 5 votes. So from your perspective, can you break down like sort of step by step, like how did that unfold for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I very much wanted Emma or Tony in that vote, and I stayed that way going through it. But I think Jonton might have been the first one to start saying, I think Jean might be more of the threat. Jean was maybe playing a quieter game than Emma, but they both seemed pretty equally like the head of their tribe in terms of like the mouthpiece is the person that's sort of standing in front of these decisions and these actions that are happening. And I think that we kind of got this fear that Jean was this like really strong, quieter player that was like pulling a lot of strings behind the scenes. And so I think Jonton started it. And then it was sort of in these one-on-one conversations I'm having with Justin, with Zach, with Tom, that it's starting to be like, ooh, okay, maybe we should just do Jean. Like maybe Jean is more the threat here. I do remember feeling myself like maybe that wasn't the biggest threat, but I also thought we're taking this to the final 5. It doesn't matter what, we're just going to vote everybody off one by one. Foolish me.
So you thought.
So I thought, so it was kind of like, okay, cool. Like if you guys would rather do Jean, fine. We're going to do this one by one until it's just the 5 of us. Clearly we were not all thinking that way.
I think in retrospect, it probably worked out for you guys that it was Jean and not Emma, because Emma, as we'll get to, flips at the final 6 and joins you. My theory, I don't think Jean does that. So I think you guys.
I agree with you. I think that it was absolutely the most, the smartest move in the end for us. And regardless of how we were thinking at the time, for sure, it made more sense.
And it works out for you as well, because we're about to get to this next episode where Zach talks about how he wishes he could have kept Jean because he had a move to make.
Very true. And he might have made the move.
So something that happens in this next episode is we actually see events a little bit out of order with this whole Tom-Zach situation. So the actual order from the day is before Jean's even voted out, Zach goes to Tom and Jonton and says, I want us to be the final 3. And I think we might need to vote out Kim or Justin at some point. And both Tom and Jonton are like, absolutely not. We're not interested in that. And I believe shortly after that, Tom then comes to you and says, Zach is talking about this. Do you remember a conversation where where Tom sort of outlines this for you, what's going on behind the scenes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Tom came to me and told me that my name was being brought up, which was an absolute shock to me at the time. I really had no idea. And I did not suspect anything at that point. But then I was hearing a bunch of different things. It seemed that was a very chaotic vote with a lot of different conversations happening. And I think when I heard it originally from Tom, I was concerned, but I was also more like, oh, this is something to keep an eye on moving forward, that I might be the first one of us I did not expect in that moment that I was going to be on the line in that vote. I really didn't expect that until the very end of all the conversations, which was that last minute and a half walking from camp to tribal council, where I was told, oh, it's you, and then had to very quickly spin a whole lot of things in a very short amount of time. And I'm still not sure how it worked out, but it did. And I was very fortunate.
Before we get to that moment, because that is a pivotal moment that actually was barely captured on camera because it's during the walk to tribal. So even before we get to that final 8 challenge with the whiteboards, you go to Zach and Tom. And I think that this is when Tom shows you guys his idol for the first time. This is when you actually see it for the first time. And you pitch a final 3 deal to Zach. My understanding was that was in response to hearing that he was talking about you. You try to like sort of fix that up. Talk to me about that. Was that a legitimate final 3 in your mind? Was that damage control?
Yeah, not at all a legitimate final three. I always intended on taking Justin to the final three, regardless of what was happening. But that made the most sense for me in that moment. And this is really where you start to have to play that strategic game. Where I messed up was not having enough time to go find Justin and tell him that I had said that, because there was a moment that I don't think is actually in the show.
It's not. I know what you're talking about.
Talking in a group and Justin storms up to me and he's like, so I hear you're talking about getting me out for the final three, and like stormed off. And I was like, oh my God, no, like this is, because that truly was not what I was planning at all. And I'm like, oh no, now I've ruined my alliance. Like, but luckily I was able to be like, no, I promise you, I was just saying that for the benefit. I think at that point I was kind of fine with anybody. I did think Johnson was probably going to go fifth, because he was the least predictable, which is difficult for challenges in terms of like, you don't know if he's going to pull out like a somersault at the end of something. It's an incredible move, but also bought us like a second and a half that we didn't have. And so that was always my fear, was that I felt like he was the least predictable. And that to me made me nervous. After that, I think at that point I was comfortable either way with Zach or Tom, but I would never have gone with Zach and Tom at Justin's, peril. I never would have done that.
Got it. Do you have any memory of a conversation with, I believe, Tom and Justin speculating about Johnton potentially being a huge threat to win? I seem to remember there was some concern that if you just pick off all the Tortugas, they might be so mad that they're going to be like, well, Johnton's such a funny guy, like we're going to vote for him because like he was just being like, you guys took this really seriously. So to get back at you, we're going to vote for the funny guy. Do you have any memory of this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a real concern. And just like, all right, you guys might all hate us by the end of this, but he's kind of hard. He's a hard guy to hate. Like it's hard not to love Johnson. He is so unashamedly himself in every single moment and committing to that. Like it's an incredible just spectacle to watch him do what he does. And so that was like, wow, this is somebody that is hard to root against and is really making himself known too. This is not a behind the scenes person. Like it didn't matter if you weren't in our tribe. Like you saw the somersault, you saw you're seeing who he is. And with everything that he had to offer, it really started to be like, ooh, this could absolutely be a threat for us. And so I think that's another reason why I think had we actually gone final five with the original Hara tribe, I think that Johnson probably would have been the first to go, because then we're all a little bit more in the same playing field as to like, who are we in this game? How have we been playing this game? I think the rest of the four of us were a little more aligned there.
Got it. Did you have a sense during this round that Zach was up to something? Was that on your radar at all?
Not at all. Not at all. I really didn't. I mean, I did hear from Tom that my name had been brought up, and that was disappointing to me because I thought after that first conversation, where I also was lying, that like he was on board for that final three, that I was not on board for. I really did think that. And I think that looking back is one of my biggest downfalls, is that I had so much faith in that Hara 5, and I should have known with, I think, again, how much I was putting myself in front of a lot of these conversations and decisions, that I should have been expecting a target on my back before I did. But to me, it was so like, of course we're going to go final five. Like I was so team oriented at the end of day one, that it absolutely blew my mind that anybody in my tribe was going to come for me at that moment. And I certainly did not expect Zach at all. Like he's such a nice guy. Like not that that wasn't nice. Like it was strategic. I totally respect it, but like I was absolutely mind blown. Did not.
Right. Now, Kim, I think we have to settle one of the biggest mystery moments to me. This is like not even just a thing that's confusing to like somebody watching. I have no idea what happened. So we see in the episode, Johnton says to Tom, he spills the beans. He's like, hey, like there's a plan in motion. Like Kim is going, like so sad. It is what it is. And we see a shot of Tom and you walking to tribal together, but we don't hear what's being talked about. But then at final tribal council, Justin takes credit for being the one who told you what's going on. So I want to set the record straight. Do you remember how you found out specifically that you were being targeted that round?
I knew from Tom that the conversation about me was turning. I knew that was happening. I did not know it was happening then. And I didn't know, and he might have said that it was coming up then, but whenever the conversations were after that, I was really not expecting myself to be on the chopping block. So even walking to tribal, whatever he and I were talking about then I was not thinking that I was like about to go or was in danger in that moment. Justin ran up to me and pulled me aside and said, "It's you. I don't know what's going on. I don't think I can do anything, but it's you. It's you." And that was when I was like, oh my God, it's me right now. Like, this is not a future thing. This is happening right now in this moment. And that was like the craziest, literally, I think it was like less than 2 minutes on this walk. I knew I was like, oh my God, okay, I have to turn this around. And then I had a very short amount of time to have a few very quick conversations to work this in my favor. And it was really exhilarating and stressful, but very excited that it worked out in my favor in the end.
So do you remember who you approached during that? Because it was like, we saw like just a quick, like short, like a throwback footage, or not throwback, flashback footage of it, of like you talking to like Andrew and Emma, just like, we barely even hear what you say, just like vote John Ton. Do you remember like who exactly you approached during that time and what your pitch was to them?
Yeah, it was really the two of them and then Tony, and that was two separate conversations. I knew that Andrew and Emma were kind of like adrift and not really knowing, like wanting to be a part of what was happening, but not really in with anybody. So I went up to them and was like, this is what we're doing. We're voting for John Ton. All right, you good? We're voting for John Ton. Zach's going to be next. And I think that they weren't totally sure where they stood with people or what was happening. And so we're excited to be brought in, especially because the person that I was saying was someone from my own tribe. Like, clearly something's happening in the majority tribe right now that like we're cracking. And that's a great opportunity for them to like, okay, like, yeah, sure, we're going to jump on this. Tony, I can't remember how this all went down, but I knew that Tony was like more a part of this decision. And I went up to him, and Tony, I feel like looking back, he was like my, like the person that I felt like was my rival. Like, and I like looked him in the eyes and I was like, I know what's going on. We've all switched. We're voting for John Ton. You should vote for John Ton too. Everybody's doing this, whatever. And him kind of being like, looking like a little bit like, oh my God. Because I'm sure I was like pissed beyond belief, like so fired up in that moment. He's like, oh my God. And moving forward, he did vote for John Ton. I thought he voted for me, which wound up being a whole plot line through the rest of the day there. But yeah, so it was really those three. And that was all I needed because I knew that I had me and Justin. I don't think I knew at the time like what was happening with Tom, but then I knew that I had Andrew and Emma, and I was hoping to God I had Tony. And it was a very quick thing. And I think that's why, like, I don't think Zach and John Ton had any idea that I don't think there was almost not enough time for it to have turned the way that it did, but it was just a couple of very quick targeted conversations that I think like last minute spun it away. Right. And I also think looking back, I think Tom said this too, this was not the time to do this. Looking back, I get it now. One more person down from the other tribe. Like, this was a little bit early to start messing with our numbers. And I think that might have incentivized people from the other tribe to kind of be like, yeah, this seems extreme. This seems odd. We're going to come to the other side of that. I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but that to me kind of makes sense, I guess.
No, I mean, I think that when you talk about targeted conversations, like you chose the right people to go to. Like you went to Andrew and Emmett, like Zach didn't approach them all day. And both of them, like afterwards, are like, yeah, if he had told me, like I would have. And of course, he's got like, you know, Andrew's your best friend. Emma seems like she's going to leak a plan because like it doesn't really matter to her. Like there's sort of interesting circumstances with all of it. So you pull it off, you shift the tides, you deliver the best voting confessional. I will never forget. See, because you're right, you were fired up, and it was like so apparent in just the way that you walk up to the voting confessional, deliver the line, drop the vote into the box,
so mad. Oh my God. And actually watching it back, I'm like, wow, I'm actually surprised I'm as composed as I am. I remembered being a lot nastier about my comment with my screw you, Zach and Johnson. Like, I was like, oh, I actually said that, but like a little more friendliness in my voice than I felt at the time. I was irate. I had so much faith. I never expected this. It made no sense to me. And I think that's what I say. I'm like, we have a final five. Let's turn on each other then. Why are we doing this? Like, I hated having to vote out both of them at that point. It wasn't what I wanted. And I was just so, I took it so personally in that moment. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, really? You're messing this up right now to come at me? Oh, I was so bummed out. And I was and then to thank God it actually went down the way it did, because it would have been a super lame thing had I been like, screw you, Zach and Johnson, and then nothing happened. And for me to say like, Zach, you're next. Thank God it played out, because it makes me look a lot cooler in that moment than I probably actually was. And so that was just pure luck on my part.
I mean, it's like they say, like, if you come for the queen, you better not miss. You say, just like, screw you, Zach. Zach, you like drop the Zach, you're next. And then it literally is.
It worked out really well, thank God, because it's a bad look if it had gone any other way. So I was very lucky.
So let me ask, because we do get to the next vote immediately after John Ton leaves. I think, watching the footage, like, it's very apparent watching you that you're still very like you said, like, you were affected by that, like by that attempt on your life in the game. We do this next vote. Like, in theory, you could have said like, hey, everybody, like, let's put this aside. Like, we got to get one of these Tortugas out anyway, because otherwise we're going to be 3-3. Tom has a lot of interview clips where he's like, this is exactly what we wanted to avoid. Why stick with voting for Zach?
I never would have trusted him again.
Yeah.
I trusted him less in that moment than I did anyone in the other tribe. I felt like Meg at that moment had more motivation now to be on my side, because we just did this together. And that just destroyed all the faith that I had in him. And again, looking back, I very much came out of day one with too much of a team mentality. It's not the game. You're playing an individual game. And I got too attached. So I was very emotionally impacted by them coming at me and feeling like, oh my God, I didn't do anything to you. And I totally get where he's coming from, of like, oh, this is a move of respect. Like, absolutely, looking back, but in the moment, right, it was like, wow, I had so much faith in you, and now I trust you less than everyone. And so it was just like, I clearly like was not recovered from it in that moment, was not ready to do that. And also, I think I constantly would have been looking over my shoulder, which you always are, but all the more so with him. And I think even if I had said that, I think he would have known that he was next on my list. And that's right, a very difficult thing to move forward with, that now something has been broken and I'm not sure how we're going to fix it.
Now, also at this point, you think that Tony has voted against you, and like, you're talking to Justin about it, and like Justin's just like, which, like, he has a lot of funny one-liners about it. Like, do you feel similarly towards Tony as you do towards Zach? Like, this is a person I can't trust. I can't work with this person. Like, that's a line. Once you cross it, like, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, and I do expect everyone to be deceptive and have their own deceptive moments. But what I never doubted Justin. Again, too much faith in my like team mentality here. Never doubted him. So was fully convinced it had to have been Tony. And I also got the vibe early on that Tony was bonding with the rest of my tribe more than me. I didn't get the vibe that he was like into what I had to offer in terms of like game playing and stuff like that. Like, I didn't get the vibe that he was like, had a good vibe about me, I guess. I kind of felt like he was a little bit standoffish to me. He was a little bit more interested in talking to the rest of the five of them. And so I totally believed it when he turned on me. Because I was like, I don't know that he has really liked who I am to start with. Again, not on a personal level, but just on a gameplay level. It's just like, oh, okay. Like, I think he's keeping his distance from me. And so I'm kind of keeping my distance from him. And so when that happened, I'm not at all doubting Justin. I figured Emma and Andrew, like, it made more sense for them in that moment. So I'm like, oh, okay, Tony. For the rest of the time, I didn't trust him again. And that again, I do expect deception, but what to me was so bad about it was that not only did he do it, but he stuck to the lie forever. And poor Tony to find out at the end that he was always telling the truth. But I really was like, at least come out and say, like, no, I put this vote in for you. Like, I felt like I had to do it. That to me would have been like, all right, at least now we're kind of on the same page. But I was like, this guy is out here lying to my face round after round. Like, I don't trust him. And little did I know, I should have looked right next to me and I would have found the deception. But it's a great thing looking back on it, very entertaining.
It was a wild move. And like the payoff at the end where he finally reveals and you like crack up at the realization of what happened. And like,
oh my God, it was wild. And because I did, as soon as Tony got voted out, the very first thing, he sat down next to us,
right.
And I immediately was like, did you vote for me that time? Like, I was still and he's like, I swear I didn't. And then I'm like, oh my God, it was Tom or Justin. Like, he has no stake in the game anymore. Like, like, oh my God. So I'm sitting there that whole time waiting for these like things to happen. And one of these guys did this, and I'm just sitting there like holding my breath, being like, oh, I cannot wait to ask this question. And then Justin offered it up on his own, and I'm like, oh wow, like that was really, I mean, I think best move of the game. It was incredible. It was so ingenious. It totally threw me off. It ruined any sort of dynamic I could have had with Tony because of how little I trusted him. I mean, it was just like spectacular. I think he deserves like more money for winning the game because of that. It was so good. It was just such a good thing. It was
like you got to hand it to Justin. Brilliant tactic, just on like many levels. But we'll save that for Justin's interview. I'll tell him how great he is then. So we're at the final 6. You guys get back to camp, 3 versus 3. Like, this is the worst case scenario probably. But then suddenly you're approached by Emma, who wants to join you guys. What did you think about that when she came to you and said, I voted with you every time. I want to vote with you guys. I'm done with these 2. Like, I'm joining you guys.
I was thrilled. I was like, this makes things easier for us to not have to worry about the 2 of them together and maybe pulling one of us. And Emma had been great the whole time. She was fun. She was funny. Like, she was easy to talk to. She just like had the bad luck of being on the other team to start with and coming in with that deficit. But I was thrilled. I do think we still kind of were like, okay, we're going to get rid of Tony and then we'll probably get rid of Emma, because I still felt in that thing, like the one moral standing I had was sticking with this alliance and I was not going to turn against them. Even if now looking back, like, oh, maybe it would have made more sense for me to like try to work something with her and move away. I think she would have been next regardless, but it made things feel a lot easier to be like, okay, awesome. Like, I trust you. I didn't trust Tony at the time. So sure, like, let's move forward with this.
And how was it voting out Andrew that round? Because that is when ultimately it's that moment of like, would you vote out your friend? And we found out you would.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, you got to respect the gameplay. That was the move. It made sense at the time. I didn't trust Andrew as much in the context of this game as I did Emma. And so it just made sense to me. I also was viscerally aware of the concern that my tribe might have for me having a secret thing with Andrew. And so I think even earlier on that day, I don't even think it was during that vote for Andrew, when we were going to split a vote between people, I think I said, like, I'm happy to cast a vote for Andrew right now, if that's going to make anyone feel better, because as soon as I realized I don't think he and I are going to be working together here, I was really concerned about making sure that I was not going to be suspected of having that going on, because it wasn't the case. And I knew he and I were both there to play and really go all in. So it was I mean, you don't ever want to have to vote off someone that you love off the game, but it was really the only move that made sense at the time. So it was like, all right, this is what we got to do. And we both really wanted to make it to day 2. So the fact that we already had was like, okay, we're talking about the matter of a few hours here. Like, we're going to
exactly. Yeah. It's easier than if like you voted him out at the merge and it's like, all right, sorry, bud. Like, now you got to hang out the rest of the day. Yeah. It's a little easier that you made it pretty far. So once Andrew's out, your team back in the majority, Hara's back on top. Uh, is it safe to say that even though Emma was, for all intents and purposes, working with you guys and Tony's on the bottom, that the final three was always going to be you, Tom, and Justin if things went perfectly?
At least from my perspective, I won't
Yeah.
speak for them. Absolutely. Yeah, I would have taken them to the final three 100%. I think that I was so concerned about the perception of me being that I was overly strategic, manipulative, that like if I had turned against either of them before I absolutely had to, I was afraid that was going to lose any of my standing from a jury vote. Like I need to show that I have integrity to the people that I have committed myself to in this game. And so I think even if I had sat there and gone, oh, well, you know, Tom's more likely to win than Tony or Emma or anything like that, I still think that I would have felt like, who is going to vote for me if I'm not true to at least these people that I've been true to the whole time? Like, how do you earn and want to give me that in the end? And also I loved the both of them. And so it was like, kind of like, whatever happens at that point, if we can be final three, I was truly going to be thrilled with that because both of them were incredible teammates. And however that wound up would have been fine with me.
Yeah, did you have like a preference in your mind, thinking like if it is the three of you at the end, like which one would you want to be at the end with between Justin or Tom?
Justin, but again, because like that was my original thing. I was literally going from the outside in terms of like, how early did I connect with you? And I connected with Justin before I connected with Tom. Having to cast that vote for Tom that I did once we get down to the very end was brutal. I hated having to do that because like I really, really felt like we have been such good teammates. I feel so strongly about our connection as a trio and as this group that we started, even as like the five of us before Zach and Jonathan went. I hated having to do it, but Tony wasn't an option and Justin was my original. And so just based on the principles that I was sticking to, Justin was going to be the person I stuck to in the end.
Got it. So speaking of Tony winning immunity and foiling plans, we're at the final five. He wins his second consecutive immunity, and a very interesting plan is hatched for you guys to get everyone in the game to put all your votes on Tom and for Tom to play his idol. Now, can you talk me through how this decision was made, why this decision was made? Like, you very easily could just be like, all right, like, sorry, Emma, like that's the name of the game. Like, we're just gonna vote you out normally. But instead, like this big event happened that was kind of wild to behold. Can you talk me through that a little bit from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think at that point, the goal was, okay, we're going to go after Emma now because we're not going to turn on the three of us yet. We still have one other person to go with, but we would love to create a situation where Tony feels like he's in with us and that we are a foursome now working together. I do distinctly remember, because I think that this was like a little bit contested in like their accounts. I am pretty sure that both Justin and Tom distinctly separately talked about this plan to me, like both came up with it on their own. And then because I think Justin in the end says like, I planned for this. And I think you can see Tom like have a moment of being like, like, I feel like I did. I think they kind of both were having the same idea separately. And I think I remember having those conversations. I do think Justin might've been the one in the end to like start really working that in. But I kind of remember the conversation we had with Tom. And I almost feel like it was this sort of like implied thing that Tom sort of like was like, oh, I could do this. And so it makes sense to me why like they both would feel like, oh, I like came up with this. And I think that like that's true for both of them. But we thought that was the best thing at the time, because then we can be against Tony, but have him think that we've like all come around and worked with him.
Well, you know, Tom plays his idol. And one of my favorite moments of that is a very small moment when he gets up and plays it. You look devastated. Like, I don't think you know, no discredit to Justin. I don't think he stayed in character as much as you do, with like the shock of like, oh, I had no idea. Like, I can't believe it. Like you, and like, you're like, good game, Tom. Like, it was really excellent acting on your part. You stuck the landing of that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My acting background did come into play a lot with this whole game. It served me well. And that's the prime moment of that. I had to play it because I needed that. I needed to play it off like, oh, okay, like this is really a shock to me.
Well, you guys, so you make it to the final four, and the worst case scenario happens. Tony, who earlier that day had said to your faces, I just want to last a couple rounds and then maybe I go on an immunity run. He goes on an immunity run and wins final four. So like what's the reaction to that moment when he gets the last ball in the bucket and it's done? Tony's in the final three and one of you is going home.
It was awful. It was one of the most heart-wrenching moments of that entire game. It felt so much like there's no way Tony is going to win this one. He's won the last few, like there's no way. And going through it, and I remember my stupid ball falling off, and then you thinking I had a ball.
I thought you had another one. Yep.
And you gave me the number, and like my having to be like, no, man, it's only 2.
I know you like flashed the piece.
I'm like, no, it's 2. Like, because I would never cheat on. Like, I'm playing in a game with integrity. I'm trying to. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm on camera, so like even if I wanted to,
you would. Yeah.
But it was like, oh my God, my heart dropped into my stomach. It was so difficult and brutal in that moment. Because it's like, this is it. Okay. Like we have to turn against each other now. Like, and that to me, I knew immediately, like I said, like I had the principles I was playing on. I knew I was going to be supporting Justin. But I also immediately felt unsafe in my own standing, which clearly I should have, because I continued to feel as the game went on. And this now is being supported by my own distrust of Tony because of what has happened with Justin's vote and thinking that he has been continuing to lie to me and all of this stuff. Like this disconnect that I felt with Tony, I think only that chasm got wider as the day went on. There just was this thing of with everyone else, you kind of could feel like, okay, like we can work together in moments, even if we wind up having to work apart. I never felt like I was working together with Tony, which I absolutely was digging myself into with my own feelings of what had happened. So I immediately was like, he has the immunity idol. I think I am probably the one that he's going to be looking at the most. And so I was panicked and like, man, all we wanted, like we could have done it. We could have gone final 3 with the Hara tribe had that whole thing not happened. So I think that was even more of a like this really sucks. Like we don't have to be here right now, and we are, and that was tough.
Right. So at this final 4, it's not on the table for you to throw Justin under the bus. Like that's not something that's on the table for you.
Well, I shouldn't say. I do think at that point, and I think I actually say this, I think that if the rest of them had been like, we're going for Justin, I do think in that moment I probably would have, because now we're down far enough that we are all playing this game individually. And so if I'm going to turn against him, this is going to be the time to do it because I have to. And I will save myself in that moment. So I do think that was a consideration at that point of like, okay, if this makes the most sense to keep me in, like this would be the moment. But if I had any option, I would not have done it unless that was my only other thing going for me. And I do remember trying because Tony was making the decision here. Like he had the idol, he was making the call. I remember pushing Tom in my conversation with him because I felt that loyalty to Justin still and hoping that was going to be the conversation, and Tony telling me, yeah, we're going to go for Tom. And so I walked out of my conversation with Tony being like, we're going for Tom, still in my heart feeling like, I don't think we're going for Tom. But
Did you and Tom have any conversations before that vote? Because obviously if you two are talking like then the talk is voting Justin. Did any conversation like that happen with the two of you?
No, I don't think I had a conversation with either Justin or Tom like that. I think we had that conversation, the 3 of us, that I do think is in the episodes of being like, this has been awesome. Like, I have loved working with you guys. Like, this has been so great. I don't know what conversation the 2 of them had, but I don't think I had a conversation with either one of them at that moment of like, okay, who are we going with? How are we doing this? I do think I felt like if anybody's going to save me right now, it will be Justin more than Tom. But I don't remember talking to either. I think it was almost awkward in that moment. You're like, okay, like it's gonna be one of us. Like things got real quiet for a while there, just
Yeah,
waiting.
yeah.
Like we each got to talk to Tony. We each got to see what he's thinking, and then one of us is going home.
Right, right. So we get to tribal council and we have the tied vote and then a deadlocked vote. Were you expecting either Justin or Tony might end up flipping at that point, or did you feel like they were probably locked in where they were?
Yeah, I did not expect to flip at that point. I mean, I was really surprised that Justin flipped the vote to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I do say, like, I'm hoping, but I really didn't expect it. And that is one of my favorite things on camera is seeing like, you read out the second Tom vote and it takes me a second. I'm like, oh my God, like, oh, wow. Like I was so ready to hear a third Kim and be like, that's it. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. We're in this. I didn't expect it to change in that second silent vote. Like I figured it was going to come back the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I tried to convince Tony against me because I think maybe I'm wrong on this, that we knew we were going into trivia or whatever it was that we knew we were going
You
into.
knew that there was another challenge that was like, you knew it was going to be something crazy physical because it was right there at tribal.
Right. So I think I was like, looking at our track records, he has done better than me. Like it actually does make more sense. But again, I think the rift between Tony and I at that point was too deep. He didn't trust me. I didn't trust him. So it was a pipe dream. And I think I knew that at the time. Like I'm gonna fight for myself, but I am really not expecting him to vote for Tom at this point.
Right. Do you think if you had made it to that final three challenge with trivia about the jury members, do you feel like you would have done well at that one?
I do. Well, I think the one with Andrew was difficult, that people didn't get. There was something about Andrew and improv about something.
Oh yeah, they didn't know who did improv. I guess, yeah, you would have known that because you know Andrew.
That I would have known. And so I think I would have done well. I don't know. I can't remember what all the questions were now. I think there was definitely one at least that I would have gotten wrong. But I do think I would have done well. I don't know if I would have won, but I think I would have done well.
Sure.
And that was tough, but like I had like 9 lives. I was a cat in that thing. Like I kept surviving. I was just glad to have made it as far as I did.
Of course. So as you're walking away, you turn back and go in one last, Hara, take it home. And Tony, his reaction is so funny because he's like, I didn't even vote for you. Like
Poor Tony. I was like, this is the villain. This is like the bad guy. He didn't do anything to me. If anything, he like went over the top to try to be like, no, like oh God, poor Tony. But that is the, ingenious methodology of Justin that he really, he planted that seed and boy, did it grow.
As you're walking away, like looking at that final three, is there anybody that, not seeing who it ends up being in the final two and sort of like not knowing what the jury like questioning is going to be, is there anyone in particular that is standing out to you immediately as someone you'd want to support to vote for?
I think Justin and Tony both had equally valid claims for
Justin and Tony, not Justin and Tom.
Justin and Tony, not Justin
Okay.
and Tom. Tom played a great game, absolutely. But if you're talking about who you're going to hand this win to, in my opinion, Tom was not the leader of a lot of decisions or big moves. He was an excellent team member and very communicative and loyal and really a balanced, multifaceted player. But when I'm looking at the three of them, I think he played the lowest key game. And I'm looking at Tony, who has had a run of immunity, like never should have wound up where he was, except for the pure brute strength. Like we had the numbers, we could have taken him out, but he made it impossible. Like that's an incredible gameplay. That's flashy. That's, unquestionably demonstrating why you deserve to be here. And I thought, Justin was such a leader on our tribe, was such a facilitator. Again, looking back now, I see that I think I put myself in front of a lot of those conversations and decisions that I think maybe originated with Justin's ideas, but he was smart enough to take like a little bit more of a back seat and not put himself in front of that. He was the brains of everything and saw everything and had such a almost like a chess player, you know, like anticipating people's moves, anticipating what was going to happen. I just felt like it was a brilliant gameplay. And so I think looking at either of the two of them, I think I said this to Tony after, because a few of us went out after. I was I never ever would have voted for you. I never would have done it. I never would have handed him the win, because he had become such a rival to me at that point. Even though I can absolutely say if he had won, he 1000% would have deserved it, played an incredible game. I had just posted myself so opposite him. It didn't matter who was up against it. I never would have voted for Tony, but I do think he deserved it, potentially like on par with how much Justin did.
I do. Before we get to Final Tribal, what you just said made me think of something that I would be really curious to hear. Going back to the final 6, when it's you, Justin, Tom versus Emma, Tony, Andrew, Tony wins that immunity. If Tony doesn't win that immunity at the final 6, and let's say it's just like, let's say both he and Andrew are options at the final 6, do you think you still go for Andrew because of that concern about your friendship becoming a factor?
No, I think I would have gone for Tony.
Tony would have been 6th.
Yeah, I think that he just consistently was more of that like looming threat of feeling like he's going to be a player in these challenges. He was a little harder to read, and it just felt like he felt like the least safe person that was not on my tribe. I would have gone for him if we had had any ability to. He was going to be next, and I would have really fought hard for that.
Got it. All right, so we get to Final Tribal Council. Now, I have to ask like the BS question that they always ask. And like, Tom, if you're listening, this isn't a fair question because it's based on an alternate reality. But do you think that Tom made the right decision voting Tony out and taking Justin to the end?
Yes, I do. I think that Tony played such a different game, and both Tom and Justin were coming in on the same strengths of their social game, of their like strategy, and less so because of the challenges. I know both of them had done well in some of them, but it was kind of equal. It wasn't anything. I think that when you bring in someone that has such a contrast in strengths, that's when you really start splitting the vote. And it's like, okay, anyone that like respects a challenge player more is going to go that way. Right. He has his whole other tribe that might be just more tribal loyal and stick with that. I think I would have taken Justin too. And I think he was smart to do that.
Do you think if you said before, you think if it's Tom versus Tony, again, not knowing how that final tribal plays out, but you probably vote for Tom in that scenario for like the Hara strong mentality?
Absolutely. I would have wanted Hara. I loved Tom. I thought he played an incredible game, especially because I do think his game was more subtle and easier to see when you were actually playing it than like maybe from the cameras, because he was just like a quieter, more subtle player and subdued. I would have given it to him in a heartbeat. I personally, considering that's my own strength in a gameplay, the social strategic, I would have respected that gameplay more, and I would have gone for him regardless. And also, like I said, there's nothing that was going to make me vote for Tony in that fight.
All right, enough about these hypothetical alternate realities. Back to the real one. Justin and Tom, final 2. What happened during that final tribal council, if anything, if anything did persuade you? What made you finally, like, when you put pen to parchment, vote for Justin to win?
His vote against me. I respect that so much. Like oh my God, it's brilliant. It threw me off for the rest of the game. It changed all of the dynamics of every single thing I did moving forward, of my connection with Tony, who was like arguably the other biggest threat. Like it was brilliant. It was brilliant. That alone, you can take everything else out of that game. That decision would have made me vote for him. It's so good. I respect the hell out of it. It was like incredible. But besides that, I do just personally, I think a social strategic gameplay to me is more impressive, because it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I'm biased, but like, I find that to be more difficult. And like, I guess like, because you can be a challenge winner. That's incredible. Like, that's awesome. It takes you far, but I think it's harder to ingratiate yourself with like a whole group of people that you don't know and really form these connections and work these things and play these strategic deceptive moves. That to me is like where I love Survivor. That's like where my love of the game comes from. And so absolutely, like that was just like, yeah, for sure. I respect it. I think he deserves it. And I had developed the strongest connection with him out of like anybody else there. So even just from that level, it was like, yeah, of course, this should be Justin.
All right. Well, Kim, that takes us to the end of the game. Kim, we got a bunch of fan questions who wrote in. A lot of people want to hear from you. A lot of questions for you. Friend of the show, Hannah, wrote in. Hannah writes, Kim was a boss out there. Would she play again? And this is a non-binding contract. I'm not going to say, well, Kim, but what do you think? Would you play this game or a game like this again, you think?
If you offered this every single weekend for a year, I would play it every single weekend for a year. I loved it. It was fantastic. I would do this forever. It was the most amazing experience. One of the highlights of my year last year, 1000%.
That's awesome. When I asked Andrew that, he said, maybe in 3 years I'll play again.
That's so Andrew. Oh my God, I love it. He's like, I need a nice break, but yeah, sure. Down the road.
All right. Good to know. Good to know. If we ever need like a returning player, like, hey, Kim, I know the game's tomorrow, but we need you. We got to get you back.
I will drop anything for sure.
That's awesome. Another big fan of the show, Erica's Hourglass writes in, would Kim play Real Survivor? Because I really enjoyed her. Would you go on the real show?
Absolutely. It's something that I've thought about significantly since doing this. I would love it. I would really enjoy the actual survival element. Taking it to that next level and like really being out there fending for yourself, I think would be incredible. And so it's definitely something that I am seriously considering. And so I appreciate the support, and hopefully if I make it there one day, you will all tune in and watch and vote for me there too.
I think you should send a tape in. Legitimately, I think you'd be an actual good fit for the real show. Like we got to get you on. We got to get you to Fiji.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Keith wrote in. Keith wants to know, would you come back for a celebrity season? Would you? So I guess the idea here is like 15 celebrities and Kim. Does that appeal to you?
Yeah, I feel like I'd be super comfortable around a bunch of celebrities for sure. Absolutely. Hi, Keith. First of all, I know Keith, and that's sweet of him to send in a question. Yeah, I absolutely would. And if he means more like bringing back the favorites, absolutely. If we brought back a bunch of people from this season and like did a fans versus favorites, that would be amazing. I would absolutely do that. But also, if you want to gather a bunch of celebrities, Dylan, and put me on camera, I would love to do that too, for sure. That would be great.
Kim, give me one celebrity. If I said, Kim, I've got the budget to get one celebrity on the show, who would you want me to get to play with you?
Oh my God. Well, my diehard my biggest fandom is Bob Dylan, which is an unrealistic person to do this. But if we're talking unlimited money and bringing in elderly Bob Dylan, that's who I would like to do this with. I think he and I would have a great time together.
All right. Millennium Park 2 Alliance, Kim and Bob Dylan.
It's fine. He doesn't have to do anything. He can just play music. I'll do all the shelter. I'll do all the gameplay. It'll be fine. And we'll take each other to the final two, and then he can win because he's Bob Dylan.
That's awesome. Another person you might remember from Millennium Park, Andrew wrote in. Andrew wants to know, what is one choice you would make differently in the game?
I would play it less team oriented. Like I said earlier, I absolutely would put less faith in that original tribe. I would be more on guard of them turning against me earlier. And I would have been more open to swinging other people in, breaking that earlier. Just, I think that was potentially my biggest downfall, and where I could have maybe made it further if I had broken that mindset earlier. So I think that moving into the merge day 2, I would have done a lot more to ingratiate myself with the other tribe.
Now, this is sort of an interesting, similar question. Brendan wrote in, if you could go back and change one single move or choice you made in one of the challenges, what would it be and why?
Oh boy. The first one that comes to mind is the paddle water bottle.
Oh yeah.
I immediately, my coordination not my strong suit. Like I immediately was like, this is not going to be my challenge. I don't feel good about this. And right before we did it, somebody on my tribe, I can't remember who it was now, said, one methodology of doing this is to go out and lunge at the other person and make them knock theirs off. And so even in that moment, I'm sure yours is going to fall off, but you can lunge and like get theirs down first. And I was like, that sounds like a strategy for me who can't balance this even if I'm not fighting someone. So let me just dive in. And now looking back, I think I kind of went into that fast because of my lack of confidence. And I think maybe I should have tried to sort of like play it out a little bit longer. All of the rest of them were legitimately me giving my best effort and not being an athletic or like physically competent person. And so I can't say I would have done anything differently other than like, taking more gym classes in high school.
All right, Kim, my last question from a fan. Jonton wrote in and he said, in a world where Jonton and Zach won Survivor, would you do martial arts? Now, I think that this is like he's picturing like a role reversal where you get voted out in 8th and you credit that to his martial arts skills. Jonton wants to know, would you do martial arts?
Sure, absolutely. I don't see why not, for sure. I think that, his martial arts were a huge factor in who he was as a person in this game. It was impressive. He was clearly very skilled, athletic, and talented at it. Absolutely, I would, for sure. It sounds like a plan.
I'm required to ask any question Jonton submits. So Jonton, that's not a binding contract, okay? But I know you're watching this. Well, all right, Kim, that does it for questions that I had. Anything else from your experience with the game that you wanted to talk about tonight?
I think what made it awesome was every single person on set's full commitment to what was happening, from every single other tribe member, crew, like everyone took it so seriously. And that is what made it fantastic. Everyone was fully committed. Everyone was there to play. Everyone was there to like really immerse themselves in this experience. And it was just so incredible. I talked about it for months. Like I still go back and watch it. Like it's so much fun. It was just such a great time. And I feel incredibly grateful that I was able to be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it, Kim. I feel lucky that we had you on the cast. You were such a fantastic addition and brought so much to the game. And like you said, like when we have a group that like buys into it and like gives it their all, that's what makes it fun. So I'm really glad to hear that you had such a fun experience. It was a blast having you on the show. And let's do it again sometime.
Anytime, according to Andrew, in like 3 or so years. So if you want to bring that back.
All right, he'll play in 3 years. By then you'll have played like 5 different times. Like
I would gladly do it. If you call me this weekend, I will be there. It'll be fun.
I appreciate it. That's good to know. Well, all right, Kim, thanks so much for taking the time to go through all this. It was so cool to hear your perspective on everything, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.